Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today's video is going to be our Exodus recap, and I think I'm more organized this time. I'm going to be less worried about time. You guys did not seem to mind the length of the last one. This one will probably be longer. I will not be rushing. I did want to share a few books that I'm going to mention, and I'll leave the links to those down below. And I also just wanted to preface this with this is just a recap video, a time where I can chat about everything I saw in this book, honestly recapping what happened in the book without me having in-depth studied it. When I do these recaps, it's like sometimes I have studied certain parts of these books, sometimes I haven't, but it's just more to like share and also encourage any of you guys that are reading through the Bible this year, and just something to give us a little overview of the entire book. These have been good for me because as I'm putting this all together, it takes a lot of time and it makes me slow down when I read to really think about what I'm reading, what is sticking out, what is God saying, what is God doing, and yeah. So I just figured I would say that. I've been enjoying chatting with you guys in the comments, so definitely leave comments down below on where you're reading, what you've noticed, and I'm sorry that I'm touching my hair a lot. And the sun is setting, so I have my lights on, so hopefully the lighting doesn't get too crazy. So this is gonna be a long video. Grab some coffee, grab some water, grab a snack, grab what you need, and yeah. So let me chat about the books real quick. I am going to mention this book a little bit. This is the Christ-Centered Exposition Exalting Jesus in Exodus, and these are commentaries on each book of the Bible. I have a few of these and I've mentioned these in past videos, but these are good to read as you are reading the books if you want more in-depth information and breakdown of things. These are good. And I'll leave my commentaries linked down below and my resource video that I did because that might be helpful. Andrew Murray, The Holiest of All, an exposition of the Epistle to the Hebrews. So this is a commentary breakdown of the book of Hebrews. I mention this all the time. Y'all know the gist. But this goes hand in hand with what the Lord is describing in Exodus, the tabernacle, the high priest, all that stuff. So it's really good to have an understanding of that, the OT, and just everything the Lord said there and what he was doing, because it gets broken down here and how Jesus fulfills it. Another series of books that are good to read are these by C.W. Slemming. I did mention the book that I read before was Made According to Pattern, which is about the tabernacle, and it breaks down exactly the tabernacle, how it was built, why it was built the way it was, why the things that they used to build it were used, all that fun stuff. There's another one called These Are the Garments, and then this one is also called, well, the garments, obviously the priestly garments, and then this one's called Thus Shalt Thou Serve. It's about the feasts and offerings that they had to do, that the Lord describes in this book. So figured I'd give a quick overview on all that, and then we can start getting right into Exodus. And yeah, Exodus means a going out, a departure, which obviously we know that the Israelites in Exodus, they are being freed from the bondage of slavery in Egypt. So that is where we start. Some side notes. We see our need for redemption, and I have my notes right here, so hopefully it's not annoying them. Our need for redemption, we see that in Israel's literal and physical need for redemption from Egypt and their sin. That's how we can relate to them, how lost and dependent they were to what they see and to what they know. Very similar to us. I think sometimes having a blind faith is very hard. Even back then, you know, God was working out miracles right before their eyes, and they still had a hard time seeing the invisible God, even though he was doing visible miracles. We can see how our lives relate to the Israelites, and also talking about the law, like the commandments are given not so they and us can live a life trying to follow and obey a law perfectly, but they're given to show that we could not follow the law and could not obey God's law perfectly, and that we had a need for a savior, someone to come and fulfill the law and to do it perfectly, to live it out perfectly. And we see Christ in Exodus. We see Moses as a type of Christ as he saves and leads his people, but unlike Christ, Moses was not perfect. As we know, he does not make it into the promised land. Also, you see like the correlations in their life where when Moses, they were supposed to murder all the children and any males were supposed to die at that time. Same thing with Jesus when he was born. King Harold, I think it was King Harold. He had all the kids, I think it was like 2 or 3 and under, killed. We see Christ in the Passover. Christ was the perfect sacrificial lamb, and the firstborn son to die for the sins of many. We see Christ and the Lord in the pillar of cloud. We'll break that down more because I have notes on that. And we see Christ in the law. He comes and is promised to fulfill the law, and only he can live it out perfectly. And then we see who God is throughout this whole entire thing. We learn who he is. He is the I am. But we also see God just showing himself to the Israelites over and over again, and they still don't see him. The beginning of Exodus starts off with Joseph has died. He is dead. Leadership changes, so the new Pharaoh does not care for the Israelites. They're actually worried that they are going to come against the Egyptians, so they enslave them. He is so fearful of God that he commands all the midwives to actually kill any newborn baby that is male, which I thought was interesting because you would think that since the Lord is on their side, God is on their side, why not have them be an ally? Instead, he goes and attacks God's people. The midwives do not kill the male babies. They fear the Lord. And you see that in Exodus 1:17. It says, "But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the male children live." So because of that, Pharaoh commanded that all the people would throw their male babies into the Nile River. Wild. But obviously the Lord here, he is there. He is watching. He protects Moses. His mother disobeys Pharaoh's command and actually puts him in a basket, and that is where Pharaoh's daughter finds him and claims him as her own. It says she took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." So she knew. So Pharaoh's daughter knew that whoever put this baby in the river was going against him, and she took the baby and they took Moses and raised him. His mother was able to nurse him and all that fun stuff, which I always found very interesting because she clearly was disobeying her father, and then they brought in this Hebrew baby. Obviously, we see the Lord through all this because he protects Moses. We also see Moses as he grows up. I believe a part of him was just struggling on where he fit in. He was a Hebrew raised by the Egyptians, but he still had a heart for his people. You see him, what does he do? He sees an Egyptian attacking one of the Hebrews, and he actually kills him. Oh, it is so windy out there. And he actually kills him. And you see the struggle of him. 2:13, it says, "When he went out the next day, behold, 2 Hebrews were struggling together. And he said to the man in the wrong, 'Why do you strike your companion?' And he answered, 'Who made you the prince and a judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?'" So you can see that struggle also with the Hebrew people, where I don't know if they feared him or they just did not trust him. But they saw, Moses protecting them and killed an Egyptian. But now it's kind of like this place of, where do I belong? Where, like, who am I? The Lord was still watching. The Lord was still protecting, and the Lord had plans. You see this at the end of chapter 2, where it says, "The people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God, and God heard their groaning. And God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew." And we see also that Moses married and has a child. So we're kind of like in this period where he's not sure where he belongs, and he kind of leaves and escapes because, he just killed an Egyptian. Pharaoh's after him. But now time passes. A new Pharaoh's on there. He is no longer being chased. And the Lord appears to Moses. And I love Moses' response to God's calling. He says, chapter 3, verse 4, he says, "And he said, 'Here I am.'" And this is when the Lord appears to him in a burning bush. It's just like, the voice is calling out from you from a burning bush. And he's like, "Here I am." Like, all right. It reminded me of like Samuel, when Samuel was with, is it Elijah? And he keeps hearing the Lord call out to him, and he goes to Elijah and says, like, "Here I am, like, your servant, here I am." And he's like, "No, the Lord's calling you." And he just tells the Lord, like, "Here I am." Like, do we respond to the Lord that way? I know I don't. But Moses was just like, "Here I am." And then there's a lot that we can dissect out of chapter 3 of Exodus. There's just a lot. Like, God tells Moses to remove his sandals because the place he is standing on is holy ground. And it reminds me of the Ark of the Covenant. Like, that was holy. Where God is holy. Where his glory is holy. And now we are the vessels that hold God in his spirit, and we are in the sanctification process. We are being made holy. Do we live our lives as holy? Like, this is what came to my mind. It's like, do we live our lives as holy? Like, salvation immediately justifies us, but sanctification is an ongoing process as we live. Are we living our lives striving for holiness, or are we defiling God's temple? And are we defiling what God has deemed as holy and clean? So it just really made me stop and think, like, how am I living my life? Am I living my life in a way that the Lord would say, wow, this is holy ground. This is holy. This is pure. This is sanctified. Or am I living in a way that he would consider dirty? Oh, I just dropped coffee on my shirt. If y'all don't have little shout wipes or the spray, you're missing out. It literally takes out any stain. And I'm a mess, so I have them everywhere. All right, back to Exodus. 3:14 and 3:14. It says, God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God said this to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. God tells Moses who he is. He is I am. And the Lord, Lord, all caps, it stands for his divine name, Yahweh, to be or I am, but Yahweh without the letters. And God shares with Moses that he is ready to carry out his covenant with his people. He is ready to save them and release them from this bondage of slavery that they are in. Let me just lighten up So God's telling him everything that he's going to do. Moses is kind of like, Lord, I'm not built for this. This is not me. Please send someone else. Pick someone else. It's not me. Like, I can't speak to the people. Like, please pick someone else. And I don't know what this says about me, but I was kind of happy about this. It says 4:14. It says, then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. And he said, kindled against Moses. I just thought it was interesting that the Lord was frustrated with Moses. Like I'm not the only one that frustrates the Lord, because I know the Lord is frustrated with me many a times. So it just kind of like makes him more relatable. It made Moses more relatable to me. Like, God was like, you are the one I'm choosing. Yes, he then uses Aaron to actually speak to the people, but God spoke to Moses and God chose Moses. Sometimes it's just because sometimes, we read these historic accounts, we read these retelling of these great lives of these people, their lives, their faith, their actions, their abilities, all the things God did through them. And sometimes it can seem unattainable, but really, God can use us just as much as he used them. We're more alike than we all think. Moses doubted himself, and he did not think he was capable of doing God's work. So I think that's just, I feel like a lot of us can be like this. The Lord is talking to Moses and just telling him, like, you're going to go speak to Moses, tell him to release my people, or I would do this, this, and this to him. But he also tells him, like, but I have hardened Pharaoh's heart. That's 4:21, and it says, and the Lord said to Moses, when you go back to Egypt, see that you do before Pharaoh all the miracles that I have put in your power, but I will harden his heart so that he will not let the people go. Like, God showed Moses different things to do to show him, like, I got the Lord on my side. I got the Lord's power on my side. And we see this throughout their whole back and forth, the 10 plagues. Like, God's hardening his heart, but Pharaoh's also hardening his heart. And I just thought it was interesting. I think this was my Life Application Bible. It says, Pharaoh has to take responsibility for his actions. The Lord states here that it is his sovereign hand that ultimately governs the events. Even if God hardens a sinner's heart, that person still remains responsible for his sins. And then it quotes Romans 9:16 to 24. We can pull that up on here. Romans 9:16 says, "So it depends not on human will or exertion, but on God who has mercy. For the scripture says to Pharaoh, for this very purpose I have raised you up, that I might show my power in you, and that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth. So then he has mercy on whomever he wills, and hardens whomever he wills. You will say to me then, why does he still find fault? For who can resist his will? But who are you, O man, to answer back to God? Will what is molded say to its molder, why have you made me this way? Has the potter no right over the clay to make out of the same lump one vessel for honorable use and another for dishonorable use? What if God, desiring to show his wrath and to make known his power, has endured with much patience vessels of wrath prepared for destruction, in order to make known the riches of his glory for vessels of mercy, which he has prepared beforehand for glory, even us whom he has called, not from the Jews only, but also from the Gentiles." And I just thought this was very interesting because my pastor actually a few weeks ago did a sermon, and he mentioned, like, he used the example of like a potter and clay, and perfectly explained this reasoning. And it's like a lump of clay, even like from the same chunk, no matter how much you mold it and squish it, add water and do it on the wheel, like no matter how much you try and mold it, that clay may never turn into anything. It just might not be moldable. Where some clay is molded quickly, and some clay takes a while to mold, and some clay just never molds. So I thought that was interesting and a perfect way to kind of explain the whole hardening his heart, and I really did like that expression. And then also we see that Moses almost dies. He almost dies. 24-25. It says, "And at a lodging place on the way, the Lord met him and sought to put him to death." I guess one of his kids was not circumcised, and the Lord just went through and told him, like, y'all need to be circumcised. Like, you're doing my will. You're already disobeying me. Next, we see Moses and Aaron going to Pharaoh, and we see Pharaoh's response in verse 2 of chapter 5. And it says, "But Pharaoh said, who is the Lord that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and moreover, I will not let Israel go." Very sassy. Very, very sassy. And then Pharaoh also punishes the Israelites to work harder because of this. And I find it interesting the contrast between Joseph and Moses, where Joseph, you don't see it recorded that he complained about his afflictions. You see him praising the Lord and saying that everything that was meant for bad for him, the Lord used it for good. But you see the opposite in Moses, where Moses is easily swayed by the people, by the Israelites, and a little more emotional. 5:22 says, "Then Moses turned to the Lord and said, O Lord, why have you done evil to this people? Why did you ever send me? For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to his people and you have not delivered your people at all." I feel like Moses is more like us than we think. We see in chapter 6 that the Lord is speaking to Moses, and he mentions that he appeared to Abraham, he appeared to Isaac, he appeared to Joseph, but he never made his name known, which he did to Moses. And he's just kind of like reassuring him, like, I got this. I made a promise. I'm going to take care of you. Don't worry. And so now we get to the part where God's going to start giving plagues. Plagues as Pharaoh keeps refusing to release God's people, and the Lord's going to plague Israel. And it's very interesting because as God plagues Israel, Pharaoh has his like magicians and sorcerers there to like kind of do the same thing, to show like, oh, it's not only your God that can do things. The first plague, the Nile River turns to blood. All the sea animals die. Egypt begins to stink and smell because of all the dead animals. The water is no longer drinkable, and the magicians were also able to make some water into blood. And then 7 days pass. And then, Moses and Aaron go back to Pharaoh. Pharaoh does not let the people go. And they say, you know what? The next plague is frogs. Frogs are nasty. I'm traumatized with frogs. We don't do frogs here. But they were everywhere. They were in the house. They were in the food. They were in the beds. They were coming out from everywhere. And the magicians also were able to produce frogs. But Pharaoh pleaded that the Lord would get rid of them and that he would let the people go. They do get rid of the frogs. Pharaoh lies. He goes back on his word. So the next plague, plague 3, we're on plague 3, is gnats. But this time the magicians cannot produce gnats. The next plague, flies. Only the Egyptians suffered with this. God made a division between his people and Pharaoh's people, and only the Egyptians this time were plagued with the flies. And Pharaoh Pharaoh pleads again for this to leave them, promises to release the people, does not do it. Next plague. Number 5. The Egyptians' livestock dies. And it lists like which livestock, because it wasn't like every single animal. It's certain livestock. And the Lord divided his people again because only the livestock of the Egyptians died. Next was boils on the skin, and only the boils came upon the magicians, the Egyptians, and whatever was left of the beast of the Egyptians. 7. Hail and fire happened, and we see that the Israelites again were spared from this plague, and that anyone that did not take shelter from the storm, the hailstorm, and bring their animals in were killed. They died. And Pharaoh once again pleads with Pharaoh, but this time Moses kind of calls him out. He kind of says, Moses tells him that he will stretch out his hand to the Lord, and the thunder, like all that stuff. And he says, but as for you and your servants, I know that you do not yet fear the Lord. So Moses knew that, Pharaoh was not being genuine in his pleading to the Lord. The next plague 8, was locusts, and Pharaoh's servants pleaded with him to let the Israelites go. Egypt was at this point in ruins. They stunk. They had no water. They had no food. They were struggling, and Pharaoh still refused for all of them to go. Moses said, we need all our people, all our food, and Moses was like, or not Moses, Pharaoh was like, no. This time he was like, you guys can go, but your young and your livestock cannot leave. So, and he pleads again for the plague to go away, and Moses is like, no, we all need to go. We all need to go and serve our God. So, plague 9, darkness. And still Pharaoh refuses for all of them to go. This time he says the young can go, but their livestock must stay. And next we see the death of the firstborn, which is the last plague, where all the Egyptians and all the cattle of the Egyptians, their firstborn, die. And we see the difference, and God makes no difference, whether it's the prisoner in the cell or the prince, all firstborn dead. And this is the first time that the Israelites are preparing for the Passover, the first Passover, where the Lord tells them to put the blood of the lamb, the sacrifice, and put it over the doorpost. And if they don't do this, their firstborn would die too. And this is how they would be distinguished. After that finally happens, and the Passover happens, and we see that, finally, Pharaoh's kind of like, you guys need to leave, like, just get out of here. As the Israelites prepare to leave Egypt, they take from the Egyptians silver, gold, clothing, whatever God makes them favorable to the Egyptians, and they give them all their stuff. They went, and there was about 600,000 men alongside with women and children. It's a lot of people. And they also brought along with them the bones of Joseph. I guess in Genesis 50:25, he says to bury his bones not in Egypt, not to leave him in Egypt. He's dead, but not to leave his body in Egypt. So the Lord says to Moses to consecrate all the firstborn to him, man and beast, consecrate to make holy by giving them to the Lord. And this was to remind Israelites how the Lord spared their firstborn and their cattle. The Lord was leading the Israelites out of Egypt, and he did this by a pillar of fire and a pillar of cloud. My notes here, this one does not want to stay, so we're gonna have to figure that out. The pillar of cloud is a wonderful symbol of the incarnation of the Lord Jesus Christ. A pillar stands as an emblem of strength and stability. The pillar of fire was the symbol of his divine presence that can never be erased. The pillar stands as an emblem of stability, and I think I said that, strength and stability, and it's like the symbol of God's presence, their guide, their protection, their source of life, their shelter, their hope of restoration. And then also the way the Lord led them out of Egypt, he did not leave them through the way of the Philistines, because he was, he knew that if they were going to have to fight, he was going to lose them. So he led them toward the Red Sea. As the people of Israel camped by the water, Pharaoh and the Egyptians, they decided they were going to go after them. I truly don't understand what was going through Pharaoh's mind as he was doing all this, because it just does not make sense. The people feared and accused Moses of, bringing them to die, as they do countless and countless of times, as we will see. And then Moses tells the Israelites to fear not, stand firm, and to see the salvation of the Lord. That was in 14:13. He says, and Moses said to the people, "Fear not, stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will make work for you today. For the Egyptians who you see today and you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent." The Lord was about to do something amazing. This is just something powerful. It's something, there's something about being silent before the Lord as the Lord is doing his work. And they can literally watch him work these things out. They are watching their answered prayers be done before them. Oftentimes it's hard for us to even be silent in the midst of trials and affliction, or even as we wait for prayers. We constantly complain. We are constantly giving our opinions. We are just quick to open our mouths, and we don't sit in silence enough, especially sitting in silence in the Lord, in his sitting just in the reassurance that he's going to do all things according to his will. And then we see the miraculous miracle of the splitting of the Red Sea. God positions his pillar behind the Israelites this time, because remember, his pillar was leading them through, showing them where they were going to go. And he positions himself between the people and Pharaoh's army. And God tells Moses, "Stretch out his arms over the sea," and the water split, and the Israelites are able to walk on dry land. As Pharaoh and his armies try to follow the Israelites, God slows them down. As it's now morning time, God tells Moses to, hold his hands over the sea again, and the waves come crashing in, and the Pharaoh and his armies are taken over by the water. Any of them that were trying to escape, the Lord pushes them back in. It says that many tried to escape, but that the Lord threw them back in. And after this, we see the Israelites sing praises to the Lord. That is chapter 15. They're singing a song of his victory and strength. And there were some parts that I did enjoy. Which verses were it? 11 and 12. And then also verse 13. It says, "Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glorious deeds, doing wonders? You stretched out your right hand, the earth swallowed them. You have led in your steadfast love the people whom you have redeemed. You have guided them by your strength to your holy abode." We've seen so much. I feel like we've seen so little, but we've seen so much. And I can't believe that I've been talking for almost 40 minutes. But so much has happened. The Lord has come, revealed himself to his people, has just redeemed his people, taken them out of the bondage of slavery. And now we're going to see them kind of just complain the whole time. And I just think it's interesting because it kind of connects to what my pastor was preaching on this morning. Let me scooch over. He was just kind of preaching on when there is no king. In Judges, he mentions all this stuff, but he also takes it back to Israel. And this is more later on, but I think it works well here too. When there is no king or no authority, and everyone does what is right in the sight of their own eyes, there is chaos and corruption. And a lot of the root problem is that people are not seeing God. They're not seeing Christ as their king, and Christ must rule in our lives. And you see this issue here with the Israelites coming soon. Well, you've already seen them complain. After the Lord pulled them out of Egypt, they're already complaining. But we see this a lot later on, just how little faith they had in the Lord, and how God was not truly ruling in their lives, and how easy it was for them to just slip away from the Lord. The Israelites are praising the Lord, and they're thanking him for this victory over the Egyptians and over Pharaoh. So we are at around Exodus 16, where the people are in the wilderness, and they're starting to grumble. It's been 3 days. It's been 3 days since the Lord has done the miracle of splitting of the Red Sea, and the people grumbled against Moses, saying, "What shall we drink?" And he cried to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a log, and he threw it into water, and the water became sweet. So I just thought it was interesting that it took them 3 days. 3 days to basically forget that the Lord does provide and does take care of them, and is taking care of them. Like, that the Lord is here to do for them. Like, he's going to get them out. He didn't pull them out just so they can die. The Lord does provide, gives them water. And then once again, the people grumble against Moses. They kind of say the same things every time they grumble, that that Moses brought them there to die, brought them out of Egypt. They were better off in Egypt. And they'd rather would have died by the hands of the Egyptians versus the hands of the Lord. Some variation of that. That's what they're always complaining about. And we see their faith here. Even after seeing the miracles of God and experiencing his supernatural provisions, their faith was wavering. The Lord gives them bread. The Lord gives them water. The Lord gives them quail. Is this where they were complaining about quail? But the Lord provides for them, and they just are still not seeing. I put here in my notes that this reminds me of the world we live in today. We live in a me mentality, and we're so focused about what we can get out of things, what we will benefit, and what will bring me joy. In my book, The Holiest of All, it was like perfect timing for everything like that I was reading in my notes, because they really all do connect. It said for Hebrews 9:14, which actually let me read that to y'all. It says, how much more will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without blemish to God, purify your conscience from dead works to serve the living God? One of the quotes from here is, one great reason many Christians never enter into the full joy and power of redemption, into the life within the veil, is that they seek it for themselves, only for the sake of our own advance in holiness or in happiness. The Israelites, they couldn't, like us today, I think they couldn't take themselves out of the equation. They couldn't figure out how to remove their faith from what they were going to get, how the Lord was going to provide for them, to how they could serve God and how they can love God, and just praising him for the things that he had already done and that they've seen. We forget that our life is not all about, me. It's not about us. They forgot that it wasn't all about them either. It's about God and serving God, glorifying, obeying, and loving him. The book also says, another quote from the book, it said, we must not regard the cleansing in the blood of Christ as the end, the final aim of redemption. It brings into a living relation to the living God, God and his fellowship, a life in his love and service, the living God and the enjoyment of his presence. This is the aim of redemption. I feel like the Israelites are like some of us Christians today. They kind of stopped at the Lord saved us. And many of us stop at the Lord saved us. And then they keep on groaning and keep on complaining, but they don't live a life to serve and honor the Lord. And that is a big part of the issue. The Israelites were missing the point of their redemption, which was to serve and glorify the Lord. And many times we're missing the point of our redemption, which is to serve and glorify the Lord. They had something we don't, which was the presence of God before them, but we have something they don't, which is the presence of God within us. So I was just thinking about how much we relate to the Israelites, how our redemption relates to the same redemption that the Israelites needed. Who God is in Exodus. The Israelites missed it. It was literally right in their face and they missed it. And we tend to miss it too. I think sometimes we miss the point of why God is doing everything he does, why he deals with us, why he wants a relationship with us. There are many different faces of the Lord, which we can and can't relate to him. I think there's God the Father, the God who is a parent to us, who is loving and merciful. Many of us can relate to him there. But he is also wholly beyond understanding. He is a comfort. He is peace. He is our firm foundation. He is the same today, yesterday, and tomorrow. And he is the living God. Once again, in my book, the same chapter that I was in for Hebrews 9:14, it says, he is the living God. He speaks and hears. He feels and acts. He has the power to make us know that he is near to us and that he receives us when we come near to him. The knowledge of the living God is the ground of living faith, a living fellowship, a living service. As the living God, he is all and does all and fills all, the ever-present, ever-working God. This was what man was created for in the image of God. The whole object of redemption is to bring us back to a life in a living service of God. And I think we missed the point. I know I can miss the point. We all can miss the point. The Israelites missed the point. The Israelites failed to see that God was a living God. We fail to see him as a living God. Christ is a living hope that God has promised. We live in a world twisted by the lies of Satan, and we must be diligent in placing our faith in our Lord and Savior. And I think one of the ways Satan twists things is by making darkness seem like light, and it is not. So back to Exodus, even though it's all relevant, it really is. God provides Israelites bread, the manna, bread of heaven, and he gives them the instruction to gather enough every day for what they can eat, Whatever they don't finish eating will go bad by morning, and they're to do this every day for 6 days, and on the 6th day gather enough to have for the next day, which is the 7th day, which is Sabbath, where they would not go out to get food. And then also Moses reminds the people that when they are grumbling against him and against Aaron, they are grumbling against the Lord. They're not complaining to him, they're complaining to God about what he's doing. And they ate this bread for 40 years. And I think it's amazing that God was able to provide for them for 40 years like this. And literally, it's just like a miracle in itself that, bread was falling from the sky and just appeared every morning. And still, the Israelites complain. They needed more water. They're just always complaining. And then we get to the point where Israel is then attacked by Amalek. I'm really bad at names. And Joshua gathers an army, and Moses gets his staff and holds it up over his arms. And while his hand is up and the staff is up, they are winning, they're prevailing. And when his staff comes down, the Amalekites start getting victory over them. This is just like another way that the Lord is showing himself and how he protects them, and just like a miracle in itself. Like, your hand up, you're winning, your hand down, you're not. Like, I think that's just amazing. And then we see Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, come and bring him back his family, which I don't know if I just missed that part where it said that his family was not with him, but he brings him back his family, and Moses tells him all that he has done, that all that God has done. And Jethro sacrifices to the Lord, and he also gives Moses some really good advice. And he advises him to pick able men that fear the Lord, and men that are trustworthy and will not take bribes. And he can put these men over groups of people as big as thousands, hundreds, tens, because they were leading over 600,000 men, plus women and children. And they were all coming to Moses and Aaron for everything. So this way, Moses will still be over them, but can take all the more serious things and take those to the Lord, and the other men could handle any situation. You even see God's provision there in providing his father-in-law to have that sound and wise advice. So now we're in chapter 19, and we are seeing that Moses goes up to talk to the Lord on Mount Sinai. And I think this is amazing. Like, I know we have direct access to the Lord. We can talk to him and all this stuff, but Moses had direct, immediate access to God. Like, Moses spoke, God spoke back. And I think that is amazing, because we do not have that. And I just think, I don't know, maybe I wouldn't be able to handle that, because like, that is just amazing. But like, I think it's just like one of those wow moments where I'm like, wow, Moses really did not know the blessing that he had by being able to just be in the presence of the Lord. And before the Lord came down onto the mount, he had the people consecrate themselves first and gave them strict instruction not to touch certain things, and all, don't touch the mountain, don't touch this, so they would not die. Where God is, it is holy land. And then there was thunder, smoke, fire, and God came down in awe. And the people were afraid. They also told Moses, like, you go speak to God. You speak to God. You tell us what he said, and then we'll listen, because, we're terrified. And that's Exodus 20:22. And then so the Lord responds and says, thus you say to the people of Israel, you have seen for yourself that I have talked with you from heaven, and you shall not make gods of silver to be with me, nor shall you make yourselves gods of gold. We know what's coming. It really doesn't take long for the Israelites to sin against God directly disobey him. The Lord is giving Moses the laws, the commandments. That's what you go through in the next few chapters. He's giving him the laws, the commandments, the laws about slaves, laws about restitution, about social justice, just all these different things. And he also tells him, like, when my angel goes before you, blah blah blah. These are the people you're going to have to fight to get the land. And he mentions the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, like all these people that were mentioned in Genesis 10, the descendants of Ham and Canaan, and all the people that were going to come up about Israel. So I thought that was interesting to see them connect and see that connection there. But we also see in chapter 24, we see that, Moses comes down and tells the people what God has told them. Moses was up there for 40 days and 40 nights. The Lord was going to give him tablets of everything he had spoken to him. And Moses took Joshua with him up. He left the the other people down at the bottom, like watch the people. He took Moses with him. He didn't take Moses, no, he took Joshua with him. He didn't take Joshua like directly to see the Lord, but he took him up with him, his little assistant. And God calls Moses up there for 40 days and 40 nights and gives him the tablets, instructions that he wrote. Okay, and gives him the pattern for the tabernacle, and gives him tells him what everyone's to contribute, tells him how he wants everything. Like, the Lord lays it out and made it according to pattern. It has an explicit breakdown of everything, why things were used, what was done, like every single thing, and everything was intentional. And here you see, like, God wanted to dwell in the midst of his people. He wanted a relationship with them. He wants a relationship with us. He wants to dwell with us. Like, that's why he is in us. His spirit is in us. And we'll see how idiotic these people are. And he still wants a relationship with them, which is crazy, but we are just like that. But as he's describing these things to Moses, the people are down there doing something else, and we will talk about that. But when he's describing the Ark of the Covenant, I'll put up a picture here of what I found online. And I just thought it was very interesting, the design, because in history, you go through history, you learn in class, how were kings and like royal people carried in the olden times. They were kind of carried like this. Like I will post pictures, like you see, it's kind of the way people were carried. Like they had the people carrying them on their shoulders by the pole, and the Lord was declaring his reign over his people. He was telling them, like, I'm the authority over you. I'm your God. I'm your Lord. I'm your king. And the people still missed it. God's describing to Moses everything: the garments, the tabernacle, the ark, the offerings, all that stuff. He also lets Moses know, like, I have given skill and intelligence to people to be able to do this. Like, God did not ask anything of them that they could not do and that they did not have the provisions for. And now we get to the part where Moses comes down from the mountain, and after being gone for 40 days and 40 nights, and we see that the people have lost their marbles. As Moses is up there, the people go to Aaron and they're like, we don't know what happened to Moses. We need a God. Make us a God. So Aaron tells them, give me your gold. He melts the gold down, makes them the calf, the golden calf, and they are worshiping. They're singing to this calf, and the audacity. And they said, these are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. I thought that was so interesting, because the Lord showed himself to these people, brought them out of the land of Egypt, and then they made a god. They created their own god and said that is the God that brought them out. Yeah. And the Lord is angry. So he sends Moses down there. He's like, your people, these people who I have just brought out, I'm angry. I'm going to destroy them. I'm done. Like the Lord is over it. The Lord's wrath. He's like, my wrath is upon these people. And Moses pleads with him. He's like, Lord, like, no, we've done all this. Remember your covenant. Like I will go down there. Moses leaves from the Lord. He goes to Joshua, and Joshua's like, there must be war. I hear the people screaming. Things are happening. I hear noise. They get down there, and now Moses is angry. And I think now he kind of understood the Lord's anger, because he is so angry. He just pleaded for their lives, and he sees what they're doing, already disobeying the Lord and chanting that the Lord did not set them out from Egypt. He actually destroys the tablets that the Lord gave him in his anger. Moses actually intercedes on Aaron's behalf, because the Lord ends up through Moses, calls up all the Levites to kill anyone who was worshiping or was part of this this idol that was created. And the Lord also played the people. But Moses interceded on Aaron's behalf, and we see that in actually Deuteronomy, because he really tried to say, like, oh no, it was the people, when he made it. He made the thing. I'm getting riled up. We're getting to the end here. Oh, and I have a thing here for when the Israelites created their own God from my Life Application Bible. It says, for chapter 32, verses 1 through 10, even though Israel had seen the visible God in action, they still wanted the familiar gods they could see and shape into whatever image they desired. Our greatest temptation is still to shape God to our liking, to make him convenient to obey or ignore. The gods we create blind us of the love of our loving God, who wants to shower us Yeah, still true today. You can see this especially with the way some churches have changed and have just twisted have lowered their convictions to allow certain things and just accept certain things that are clearly against the Lord and against his word. And we are just, that is just a reshaping of the Lord and trying to make it so we can feel okay about sinning, not feel guilty about sinning, not feel convicted. All that craziness. Like, the Lord has done so much for these people, and they are worshiping a gold cow. Never understood that. Moses tells the people everything that God had told them about building the tabernacle, the garments, the offerings, all that stuff. And the people give willingly out of their own hearts for the building of this, because they need materials, they need all that stuff, and they get to building. The Lord appointed certain men to be able to design and do a lot of the work that needed to get done, and they all build it. So we see the tabernacle, the garments, the ark, all that stuff get built as the Lord commanded. And honestly reading this part, like rereading the same thing that we had just read, because honestly it's, everything that the Lord puts in his word is important, and it's for a reason, and I don't know what that reason is, but the last chunk is always so hard to read because I feel like I'm just rereading the same thing I've read. But this just shows us that they did everything according to how God said. And at the end, Exodus ends with, once everything was done, the tabernacle was erected and everything there. It says at the end of Exodus, so 40:34 to the end, it says, "Then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And Moses was not able to enter the tent of meeting because the cloud settled on it." And now before this, Moses was meeting with the Lord in a tent, and he would actually be face to face with the Lord. Not the Lord in all his full glory, but like, he does actually end up showing Moses his full glory, like a glimpse of his back, because Moses pleads to see him. The Lord does show him, but like, his face ends up showing. Like, the Lord's glory is strong, and he tells him he can't show him all his glory because, you will die. But he shows him a little bit of the back, and Moses actually has to put a veil over his face when talking to the people, because his face would shine so brightly. It says, "Because the cloud settled on it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Throughout all their journeys, whenever the cloud was taken up from over the tabernacle, and the people of Israel would set out. But if the cloud was not taken up, then they would not set out till the day it was taken up. For the cloud was of the Lord." For the cloud of the Lord was on the tabernacle by day, and fire was on it by night, in the sight of the house of Israel throughout all their journey. So the Lord was still leading them, and that is amazing. And now we're going to get into Leviticus, and I don't remember what Leviticus is about, but all the laws of offering. And these are the next few chapters that are a little more difficult for me personally, because the laws and the offerings and all that stuff, I don't want to say it bores me, but it can be harder to read for me. So we're in this together. Leviticus starts tomorrow if you guys are all reading with me, or it starts today, the day that this video goes out. So yeah, exciting. It's going to be a long one, but I think it's going to be good. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys thought down below. I think I hit all my notes, and I think it went well. I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I'm parched, and yeah. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in my next one. The sun is gone.